Now let's discuss about the sampling selection. Sampling selection can be purposive selection or random selection. First, we'll discuss the purposive selection. What is purposive selection? The selection of a sample primarily aims at representing the population as whole. It is easy to carry out and does not need any preparation for the sampling frame. It can be underrepresented and the rate of population under the study. So, first we understand what is sample. Let us discuss in detail what is sample. Sample is a part of a population called the universe or reference or a parent population. Sampling is the process or technique of selecting a sample of appropriate characteristic and adequate size. So, in purposive selection, the selection of a sample primarily aims at representing the population as a whole. Hence, there can be a great temptation to deliberately or purposely select the individual who seems to represent the population in the study. So, in purposive selection, we are deliberately or purposively, as the name suggests, we have to select the sample. For an example, we are conducting a study on oral hygiene in an urban school. 30 representative students may be picked and examined and assessed for a poor oral hygiene. So it's an example of a purposive selection, as we selected or deliberately selected some student or representative. Purposive selection is easy to carry out and does not need any preparation of sampling frame. However, it can be substantially represent the rates of population under the study. Now let's talk about the random selection. In the sample of a unit is selected in such a way that all the characteristics of a population is reflected in the sample. The random sampling is useful in the investigation on the community health, since the complete enumeration of the community will not always be feasible. So, here the sample of unit is selected in such a way that all the characteristics of the population are reflected in the sample. This is possibly by selecting the unit of a sample at a random. The sample in which each an individual of a population has an equal chance of appearing in a random sampler. So as compared to the purposive sampling, we are just selecting the representative of that population. But in random sampling, every population and each and every subject has a chance to be selected in the sample. Let's talk about the advantages of a sampling. It reduces the cost of investigation, the time required, and the number of personnel involved. It allows through investigation of a unit of observation. It helps to provide the adequate and inadequate and in-depth coverage of the sample unit. So there should be some ideal requirement for the sample also. For example, efficiency, representativeness, measurability, size, coverage, and goal orientation, feasibility, and economic. So these are the things which we have to keep in the mind. Now let's talk about the sampling design. There are in general 6 types of sampling: simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster sampling, multiphase sampling, and multi-stage sampling. So let's take first simple random sampling. What is simple random sampling? A simple random sample give each member of the population an equal chance of being chosen, in which there comes a lottery method and a table of random number. So lottery method, as the name suggests, it's a one way of achieving a simple random sample is to number each element in a sampling frame. For example, giving each and everyone on the electrical register or a number, and thus use random number to select the required sample size. And it's a very, I'm talking about the lottery method only. It's a very popular method where in the population unit or number or separate slips of a paper of an identified size and shape is prepared. These slips are then shuffled, or a blindfold selection of a number of a slip is made to constitute the desired sample size. However, when the population size is large, this matter become little bit difficult. Now, second one is table of random number. Table of random number consists of an arrangement of digits from 0 to 9 in a row and a column, and is a published table. For example, to draw a sample of 10 out of 100. First, give the serial number to all the 100 patients, starting at a random, and total number of the patient from which 10 is to be chosen, and is 100, that is a 3-digit number. Means in general, the table of random number consists of a random arrangement of a digit from 0 to 9 in a row or a column, and arranged in a cunning manner to eliminate the personal selection. The selection is either done in horizontal or a vertical direction. So this method assures randomness and eliminate the personal bias. However, it necessitates a complete cataloging of the population and sometimes in a field survey. The unit so selected may be so widely spread and it enhances the cost and time of the collection of data. And a number less than 100 may be chosen as they are, while greater than 100 may be divided by 100 and the remainder may be taken as chosen sample. In this way, 10 numbers from the sample are chosen. Now comes a systematic sampling. This is a random sampling with a system. This method is popularly used when a complete list of population from which the sample is to be drawn is known. In this, every 10th or, for example, any interval number, patient or house is chosen. Then the total population divided by the sample size desired. Then we'll obtain the sample interval. We'll obtain the sample interval like this with the formula total population divided by the sample size desired. If, for example, if 10% of the sample is to be taken out of 1,000, then the sample interval should be k equals to divided by 7. That is 10% of population. We got this 10%. And select the random number between 1 and 10. Let the number be 6, for example. Then the sample consists of a unit 6. First, randomly we have chosen the 6, then 6 plus 10, that is the 16, then 16 plus 10 equals to 26, and so on. So the interval is, sample interval is 10 here in this example. I will give another example. Let's see. A systematic sampling is obtained by the selecting one unit at a random and then selecting the additional unit at an evenly spaced interval till the sample of a required size has been got. For example, let's see the other example. To obtain a sample of a patient attending a dental clinic, suppose there are 200 patients in a clinic. So it is decided to select the sample size of 20. So with the formula, we will found the sample interval 200 divided by 20. That gives the 10. So the first number is selected randomly. Say it is 4 or 5. Let's say 4. So the next until from the sample size, the 4 plus 10 will go to 12. Hence the serial number of the sample size will go like this: 4, 14, 24, 34, 44, 54, 64, and so on till 20 number we got. So this method can be adopted as long as there is a required sample size we needed. So there are some advantages and disadvantages of this method. First, it spread the sample more evenly over the population. This is the advantage, and it's easier to conduct than a simple random sample. Let's see the disadvantage of this method. The system may interact with some hidden pattern in the population. For example, every third house along the street might always be the middle of the terrace of the tree. Just a little drawback. Now let's talk about the stratified sampling. In a stratified sample, the sampling frame is divided into a non-overlapping group or a strata. Example: geographical area, age group, genders. Now the sample is taken from each stratum, and when this sample is a simple random, the sample it is referred to as stratified random sampling. The advantages of this method is stratification will always achieve the greater precision provided that the strata have been chosen so that the members of the same stratum are as similar as possible in respect of the characteristic of interest. The bigger the difference between the strata, the greater the gain in precision. Let's see one example. For example, if you were interested in internet usage for might stratify by age, whereas if you were interested in smoking, you might stratify the gender or by social class. It is often administratively convenient to stratify a sample. Interviewer can be specifically trained to deal with a particular age group or ethnic group or employees in a particular industry. The result from each strata may be intrinsic interest and can be analyzed separately. It assures better coverage of the population than a simple random sampling. So if we compare it with the simple random sampling, it ensures the better coverage of the population. So disadvantages of this method is it is difficult in identifying the appropriate strata and more complex to organize and analyze the result. So let's see what is cluster sampling. In cluster sampling, the unit sample are chosen in a cluster that are close to each other. Examples are household in the same street or successive item of a production line. The population is divided into cluster and some of these are then chosen at a random. Within each cluster unit, they are chosen by simple random sampling and other method. Ideally, the cluster chosen should be dissimilar so that the sample is as representative of the population as possible. Let's see the advantage and disadvantage of the cluster sampling. So saving of traveling time and consequent reduction in cost. Second one is it is useful for surveying the employees in a particular industry where the individual companies can form the cluster. Disadvantages: unit close to each other may be very similar and so less likely to represent the whole population. And the larger sampling error, then it has a larger sampling error when it's compared to the simple random sampling. Let's see what is multiphase sampling. In this method, part of information is collected from the whole sample and part from the subsample. Now next come the multi-stage sample. It refers to sampling procedure carried out in several stages using random sampling technique. For example, multi-stage means, for example, first if we are conducting a study in a country, then we have to select for that country. Then in that country, we have to select state of that country. Then comes a district, then village, then talukas, then cities. In this way, there is a different stages. Then comes a quota sampling. In quota sampling, the selection of the sample is made by the interviewer, who has been given quotas to fill the specified subgroups of the population. For example, an interviewer may be told to sample 50 females between the age group of 45 to 60. In quota sampling, the selection of the sample is non-random. Anyone who had the experience of trying to interview the people in the street knows how tempting it is to ask those who look the most helpful, and hence it is not the most representative of samples. So let's see the advantage and disadvantage of the quota sampling. So quota sampling is quick and cheap to organize. Disadvantages: it is not a representative of the population as a whole as the other sampling method. Because the sample is non-random, it is impossible to assess the possible sampling. So let us revise.